Good morning, everyone. Today, we are going to discuss about histology of the ovary. As such, what are the learning objectives? At the end of class, you all should be able to describe and identify the histological features of the ovary, and you should be able to draw a neat and label diagram showing the histology of the ovaries. Okay, so what as such, the internal genitalia in females, they consist of the pair of ovaries. These are the pair of ovaries. Here we have pair of fallopian tubes. This is called as the uterus, and part of the uterus is here. This is called as cervix. This is vagina. So here we are going to discuss about the ovaries. Okay. So as such, this diagram you should know, this is just a cut section with H&E staining, hematoxylin and eosin staining of the tissue of ovaries, where you can see it is more darkly stained in the periphery and light stained in the center. This center part, which is surrounded by all around these light stained and dark stained areas, they are called as follicles. So this part is called as a cortex. The peripheral part is called as a cortex, surrounding the central part, which is called as medulla. So as such, the overall organization of this for the ovary, if you see, it has outer cortex, peripheral cortex, and central medulla. Okay, and as you know, the female reproductive organs, they undergo regular cyclic changes from puberty to menopause. The initiation of the menstrual cycle is referred to as menarche. It occurs in about age of 9 to 14 years in females and marks the end of puberty and beginning of reproductive lifespan. During this phase of life, the menstrual cycle averages about 28 to 30 days in length. So as such, what are the functions? Functions of the ovary, you all know that it is gametogenesis or oogenesis, that is production of the gametes. And another very important function is production of hormones, steroid hormones called as steroidogenesis. These gametes, they are called as developing gametes, they are called as oocytes, and the mature gamete will be called as ova. The two major hormones, steroid hormones, which are secreted by ovaries in different stages, they are called as the estrogens and the progesterone. Okay, estrogen actually is responsible for promotion of the growth and maturation of sex organs, internal and external, in females, as well as it is responsible for promoting the mammary gland development, stimulating the ductal and stromal growth. And progesterone is very important here. Progesterone is actually to maintain the pregnancy, it helps in preparation of the pregnancy, particularly in uterus, for promoting secretory changes in the endometrium of the uterus. Also, it prepares mammary gland for lactation after pregnancy by promoting the lobular proliferation. Unlike males who are able to produce sperm cells throughout their reproductive lives, females produce only a finite number of egg cells, which we will discuss later on. During early fetal development, these germ cells, they migrate into the ovaries and differentiate into oogonia. So first stage is the oogonia, which give rise to different cells we'll see later on. As such, the ovaries, where these ovaries are located, you all know they are located, or you can see this is a uterus. This broad fold is called as a broad ligament. You can see here, this is broad ligament. This is double fold of peritoneum. This is a posterior aspect. On the posterior aspect, we can see a ligament of ovary, which is holding this ovary. And this ovary is attached on the posterior wall of the broad ligament by another fold of peritoneum called as mesovarium. And this exactly is location is in the lateral pelvic wall. The extension of mesovarium forming germinal epithelium also covers this, overlying the tunica albuginea. And as such, if you take the section, it has a medulla and cortex, already I mentioned. Okay, if you see, this is a fallopian tube. This is ovary. Ovary is attached to the posterior wall by this mesovarium. Okay, so this is the fallopian tube. Here we have, this is the actually broad ligament. Different parts of broad ligament. This is mesosulfix. This is your mesovarium, where it is forming a double fold covering the ovary. So it will be forming outer epithelium of the ovary. Okay. So as such, the ovary consists of, histologically, the outermost covering. This you can see, this is your germinal epithelium, which is actually simple squamous or cuboidal epithelium. Mainly it is cuboidal, but in some places a simple squamous epithelium. Beneath this area, so first is germinal epithelium, this one. Beneath this, the connective tissue, dense connective tissue, will be called as tunica albuginea. After that, it has cortex, which contains different follicles, ovarian follicles in various stages of development, and central part will be occupied by more of the blood vessels and lymphatics, nervous tissue. This is your medulla. So medulla is surrounded by cortex all around. This is the general histological structure of the ovary. Germinal epithelium. So germinal epithelium is actually the single layer of cuboidal epithelium. In some parts, it may be squamous also, and this germinal epithelium is actually a misnomer. It is not giving, or you can say it is carry over from the past, when earlier it was supposed to give rise to the germ cells, but actually it is not giving rise to germinal cells, germ cells. This is misnomer actually, and this epithelium will be continuous with the mesothelium that covers the mesovarium. Okay, so germinal epithelium instead of mesothelium covers the ovary, and this will be continuous with the mesothelium. So outermost covering, which is simple cuboidal epithelium mostly, in some regions simple squamous, this is germinal epithelium. Just beneath, so here we can see just beneath this epithelium, this is a germinal epithelium, which will be continuous with the mesothelium. Beneath this is the dense connective tissue, which contains more of the smooth muscle fibers and connective smooth muscle cells or fibers, and more of the collagen and elastic fibers also. A dense connective tissue layer is formed here in between the germinal epithelium and this cortex. This is called as tunica albuginea. What happens here? Tumors that arise from the epithelial surface of the ovary account for more than 70% of the ovarian cancers. Epithelial cells here can give rise to carcinoma of the ovaries, and the origin of surface epithelial tumors may be related to repeated disruption and repair of the germinal epithelium that occurs during ovulation. Because at every ovulation, the follicles have to come out. So because of this, it may be related to the formation of about 70% of ovarian tumors. Okay, now here the cortex. First, we are going to discuss about the cortex. Cortex consists of the connective tissue, dense connective tissue in between these parenchymal tissue that is called as ovarian follicles. Follicles here they are forming the parenchyma, surrounded by the connective tissue called as stroma. Okay, and ovarian follicles, they provide microenvironment for developing oocytes. Fine. Next will be the medulla, where we have, as I mentioned earlier, we have lots of blood vessels. It is loose connective tissue, and lymphatics will be there. Okay, so this is central part, light stained, surrounded by cortex. So coming to the cortex and each of the follicular follicles which are there in the cortex. Histologically, there are three basic types of ovarian follicles. Okay, which can be the earliest one, the one which is present just beneath the tunica albuginea, that is called as primordial follicles, which further grows, leads to formation of primary and secondary follicles, and later on the final one, the mature follicle or the GRAAFIAN follicle. So first is oogonium. Oogonium stages and events, if we say, in the oogonium, there is no any follicle actually. Oogonium give rise to primary oocyte. Once the primary oocyte is formed, it will be covered by simple squamous epithelium, single layer of squamous epithelium that will be called as primordial follicle. So the oogonia divides by mitosis, and as I said, it actually in the fetal life only in females, oogonia give rise to primary oocyte. By 5th month, there are about 7 million primary oocytes, which mostly degenerates during next 2 months, and only the less number of oocytes or follicles will be there, and finally only one follicle will be active, and which give rise to the ovum, which is secreted out of the ovaries. Okay, so those that remain will be surrounded by single layer of squamous epithelial cells. Then it is called as primordial follicle. Others degenerates. Degeneration of the primary oocyte continues. At birth, about 1 million primordial follicles will be there. At puberty, 4 lakhs remains, and till after puberty, we can say only 400 to 500 will reach the maturity, of which only one will undergo ovulation. Okay. So before that, we should, before discussing about each and every follicle, we should understand about the ovarian cycle also. Along with the menstrual cycle in females, the changes are happening in the ovaries also. These changes consist of different phases, with the monthly changes we can say in ovaries in women's reproductive life. One is the follicular phase. Each month, FSH is stimulated, And follicular stimulating hormone, it stimulates the primary follicles to grow and mature. So primordial will be converted into primary, then primary to secondary. So it is under the phase of F, and it is under, this phase is under the effect of FSH. So FSH, that phase will be called as follicular phase. After that, there will be, once the follicles are formed completely, there will be ovulation. So ovulatory phase, which is under effect of luteinizing hormone LH from the ovary. Then followed by, after release of this oocyte or with the corona radiata, the follicle, the remaining follicle, it crumples down and leads to formation of corpus luteum, which secretes the progesterone, and this is called as luteal phase. Luteal phase, the corpus luteum produces progesterone that remains, that maintains actually the uterine wall. Ultimately, there will be formation, again regeneration of the uterine wall, which was shed off earlier. So along with the menstrual cycle, we have correspondingly ovarian cycle consisting of follicular phase, ovulatory phase, and luteal phase. Okay, and if fertilization does not occur, the corpus luteum degenerates and it forms a scar tissue called as corpus albicans, which we'll discuss later on. So this follicular phase, as I told, it is for follicular development. Ovulatory phase is for release of ovum. Luteal phase is actually finally the corpus luteum formation and secretion of progesterone. Now, follicular growth. What are these follicles actually? Every time we are saying ovarian follicles. So when an oocyte is formed, it will be surrounded by the cells of the stroma. These stromal cells, ultimately one group of cells which will be secreted by the cells which are surrounding immediately, they are called as the follicular cells and or granulosa cells, and the other cells or connective tissue which is around the follicular cells, they will be actually coming from stromal cells. Okay, so first, which is formed during the fetal life, is primordial follicle. Gradually, till the time of puberty, follicular growth happens and there will be modification of oocyte, granulosa cells, and stroma. So first stage, we'll be discussing about the primordial follicle. So this primordial follicle is the follicle where we have oocyte in the form of prophase stage, arrested in the prophase stage of meiosis, and it is approximately 25 micron in diameter, surrounded by follicular cells, single layer of flattened cells attached to each other by desmosomes. So here you can see these are the primordial follicles. So we can see here simple cuboidal epithelium, germinal epithelium. Beneath this is all connective tissue, dense connective tissue, tunica albuginea. Just beneath it, you will find lots of small round things. Here the center part is oocyte surrounded by squamous epithelium, simple squamous epithelium. A bigger picture you can see. This is called as primordial follicle, and here these are all the flattened cells. Okay. And outside this will be the basal lamina. Basal lamina is here separating the stromal cells from the follicular cells. So these are the follicular cells surrounded by the stromal cells. Very clearly you can see here, they are called as primordial follicle. After that, primordial follicle grows. As it grows further, the simple cuboidal epithelium is formed in place of simple squamous epithelium. With further growth, simple squamous is converted into simple cuboidal, which also multiplies and may give rise to number of granulosa layer cells also. So initially, there's single cuboidal epithelium that is called as a early primary follicle. The cells multiply and grow and they give rise to stratification. They form stratification of the cells happen, and this leads to formation of granulosa layer cells. Then it will be called as late primary follicle. Okay. So, and after that, this will be surrounded by the stromal cells, which also arrange themselves in the form of theca interna and externa. Stromal cells, the changes in the stroma is the formation of theca interna and externa, we'll discuss. And here, the important thing is the oocyte have started secreting one eosinophilic material, which is surrounding the oocyte, separating from the granulosa cells. This eosinophilic structure is called as zona pellucida. Okay, now we can see the simple cuboidal epithelium of primary follicle very clearly, surrounded by theca cells or stromal cells. So early primary follicle where we have single layer of cells. When we have more than 2 layers of cells, then it is called as late primary follicle. Okay, the primary follicle is the first stage in the development of growing follicle. After that, now these granulosa cells, as I said, they are called as the follicle cells. They undergo stratification to form the granulosa layer of the primary follicle called as stratum granulosum. The basal lamina is outside this. It is positioning in the same place in between the stromal cells and the granulosa cells. Okay. And here maturation of the oocyte occurs in primary follicle. So this is oocyte. This is nucleolus. What happens here, as I mentioned, the connective tissue outside. So this is your granulosa cells, the bigger picture, or you can say high power picture. This is stromal cells. The stroma cells and fibers just outside the granulosa cells, they form theca interna, which is inner highly vascularized layer of cuboidal secretory cells. After that, we have, you can see the elongated nuclei. This is smooth muscle cells and bundles of collagen fibers. So more of loose connective tissue layer. So outer layer of connective tissue cells with smooth muscle cells and collagen fibers. This is called as theca externa. Theca interna will be having round nuclei. The cells will be more cuboidal secretory cells with round nuclei, and externa will be having elongated nuclei, these smooth muscle cells with the collagen and bundles of collagen fibers. So theca interna, theca externa, derived from surrounding stromal cells around the primary follicle. As the oocyte grows, it secretes a specific protein called as zona pellucida, ZP, zona pellucida. It appears between the oocyte and the adjacent follicular cells or granulosa cells. Actually, these zona pellucida protein, there are three types, ZP1, 2, and 3, of which ZP3 is most important, and it functions as the spermatozoa binding receptor and inducer of the acrosome reaction. Okay. Now coming to secondary follicular stage, also called as antral follicle. When the stratum granulosum cells reaches a thickness of approximately 6 to 12 cells, the fluid cavities appears. The fluid will be rich in hyaluronin, and that's why it is called as lichar folliculi. It continues to accumulate among the granulosa cells, and cavities become to coalesce, eventually forming a single concentric shaped cavity called as the antrum. And the follicle is called as antral follicle. So appearance of cavities means small or big. Initially smaller, they are called as early secondary follicle. When it becomes larger, then it will be called as late secondary follicle. Here the size of primary oocyte is approximately 125 to 150. Cuboidal cells are many layer. Theca interna, externa are same as were present in primary, but they're increased in size, so they are also increased in amount, and presence of antrum. Now we can see the group of cells surrounding the oocyte with the zona pellucida. These group of cells are called as corona radiata, and the one group of cell which is connecting the oocyte with the other granulosa cells, this is called as cumulus oophorus. Okay, so eccentrically shifted positioned oocyte, now it stops further growth. There will be no further growth, and this inhibition is actually produced by oocyte maturation inhibitor, OMI, which is secreted by the granulosa cells into the antral fluid, and accordingly it will act and stop its growth further. Okay, and now what happens in this diagram, you can see small cavity has appeared. So this is very beautiful diagram. You can see all these granulosa cells, theca interna, externa. This is secondary follicle. Okay, after and again here we have corona radiata and cumulus oophorus. Okay, now after GRAAFIAN follicle, after this secondary follicular stage, mature follicle or GRAAFIAN follicle is formed, which contains a mature secondary oocyte. So primary oocyte completes its first meiotic division, forming secondary oocyte 1. Second, we have now follicular cells. They undergo growth, continuous growth will be there, increase in size will be there. Approximately it reaches up to the 10 millimeter size. Because of its large size, it extends to the full thickness of the ovarian cortex and causes a bulge on the surface of the ovary. As the follicle increases or near it comes to its maximum size, the mitotic activity of the granulosa cells decreases. The stratum granulosum appears to become thinner as the antrum increases in size. And as the spaces between the granulosa cells continue to enlarge, the oocyte and the cumulus cells are gradually loosened from the rest of the granulosa cells in preparation for ovulation. The cumulus cells immediately surrounding the oocyte now form a single layer of cells of corona radiata. These cells and loosely attached cumulus cells remain with the oocyte at the time of ovulation. And only one follicle becomes a mature or dominant follicle during each menstrual cycle. Okay, we can see now stratum granulosum has thinned out here. Okay, single follicle, a single antral cavity, large follicle. Okay, now what is ovulation? It is a hormone-mediated process resulting in the release of secondary oocyte. The follicle destined to ovulate in any menstrual cycle is recruited from a cohort of several primary follicles we all know in the first few days of the cycle. And we have combination of factors like increase in volume and pressure of the follicular fluid, enzymatic proteolysis of the follicular wall by activated plasminogen, hormonally directed deposition of glycosamine glycans also, and contraction of smooth muscle cells. Just before ovulation, blood flow stops in a small area of the ovarian surface overlying the bulging follicle. This area of the germinal epithelium is known as macula pellucida or follicular stigma. Okay, we'll discuss later on. Now, what happens? Only one follicle reaches this final stage actually. And what happens here at the 14th day of menstrual cycle, because of LH surge, is rupture of wall, completion of first meiosis stage, release of secondary oocyte, and these oocytes will be received by fimbria of the fallopian tube finally, and then in the oviduct fertilization happens. If that means presence of male pronuclei also, there will be formation of zygote. Okay, and as I said, one of the area is bulged out just before ovulation, that is called as macula pellucida or follicular stigma. With the help of some non-surgical ultrasound technology or transvaginal ultrasound examination, we can make out the different follicular stages. We can know these follicular stage for knowing the fertility of the patient. In infertility, they actually do this examination so that we can make out even the number and size of the developing follicles also. Okay, so after ovulation, what happens now? After ovulation, we can see here the remainder of the GRAAFIAN follicle, they collapse and gets folded. Blood flow to the into this follicular cavity will be there, and initially it will lead to formation of a mass in which there will be presence of uh, blood. Okay, so bleeding from the capillaries in the theca interna into the follicular lumen leads to formation of corpus hemorrhagicum with a central clot. Connective tissue from the stroma then invades the follicular cavity, and here now the cells of the granulosa cells undergo changes. These granulosa cells and theca interna cells, they undergo changes. The process called as luteinization. These luteal cells undergo dramatic morphological changes, increasing in size and filling with lipid droplets. Okay, so what happens? The two types of luteal cells are which are identified here are the granulosa lutein cells. Okay, the granulosa cells here, they are, see, the cells are very much enlarged. So centrally placed nucleus will be centrally located, and therefore nucleus and nucleus very clearly you can see larger cells, clear cells. So they called as granulosa lutein cells produces progesterone. Whereas in the theca interna cells, they also uh, have deeply stained cytoplasm, small in size and periphery located, and this is called as theca lutein cells. They're smaller comparatively, more deeply stained, and periphery located cells derived from the cells of theca interna. As the corpus luteum begins to form, blood and lymphatic vessels from the theca interna rapidly grow into these layers. Okay, and a rich vascular network is formed. And corpus luteum also affects the growth of uterus and its endometrium, okay, which we'll see in later on. Now, depending upon whether the pregnancy has established or not, it will decide the fate of corpus luteum. The corpus luteum, if the pregnancy does not occur, corpus luteum degenerates and leads to formation of corpus albicans. Okay, and if pregnancy occurs, then there will be formation of corpus luteum of pregnancy. Okay, this is how it looks, corpus luteum, empty cavity inside. So if fertilization does not occur, corpus luteum of menstruation we call it, the cells become loaded with lipid, decrease in size and undergo autolysis. This is called as corpus albicans. And if pregnancy happens, then that will be called as corpus luteum of pregnancy, and there will be formation. The existence and function of this depends upon combination of factors. Okay, if pregnancy happens, then we have the action of these hormones leading to existence of this until the placenta formation starts. Okay, and then these hormones act together like estrogen, SCG, LH, prolactin, insulin. Okay, and they are called as luteotropin hormones. Okay, so now just to revise, we have, if you see, The cortex actually consists of number of follicles. First is epithelium, germinal epithelium. Then there will be having tunica albuginea. After that, the slight staining, they are all different stages of follicles. Primordial follicle, single squamous epithelium. Then primary, early primary, late primary. In early primary, there will be simple cuboidal. And if double or more layers of cells are there, then it will be late primary. Appearance of cavity, secondary follicle. Appear in large in size, and the follicle is shifted to one side with large follicle, then it will be mature follicle. And central part is medulla. So just to revise, this is germinal epithelium, tunica albuginea, and then we have different stages. So you can see the primordial and primary follicle. Okay, and this appearance of cavity, so it will be secondary follicle. Then secondary follicle again, and similarly if the size is bigger, then it will be mature follicle. Okay, and this is your after ovulation corpus luteum. Okay, corpus albicans. This is a diagram to show you how to draw all the stages: primordial, primary, secondary, early secondary, late secondary, GRAAFIAN follicle or mature follicle, and this is your corpus luteum. Okay, how they have shown nicely. This is a diagram which you can draw in your notebooks. So please go through and read it again, and thank you and have a nice day.